Hey, good morning everyone, it's TractorMan44 here. Well, definitely an 84-year-old dump trailer needs a little maintenance. Now I know in some of my videos, as this thing's going down the road, you could hear the squealing. My wheel bearings are pretty dry in there, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to go ahead and pull this whole outer bearing off and maybe repack that bearing and then fill that sump full of 90 weight or 140 weight, whatever I've got. And then I'm going to have to come up with a replacement cap. This cap has been missing for 60 years, 70 years more than likely. So we're going to go ahead and knock this nut off of here. These big old nuts, hopefully, won't be too bad in order to get loose. A little bit tighten that thing there. Look at that thing was loose. That's good. Obviously, it's been taken off and put back on with the chisel before, which is why I went ahead and got this punch. But yeah, we should be ready to pop that off of there. A few select taps with the punch, and this guy popped off of there. What I did not know was that there's a second nut on the inside, and that's what I'm saying is there's a lineup or a pinhole there that one of these have to line up to, and then this guy here, this fits into a notch on the axle. So that keeps that inner bolt from coming out, or the inner nut. So it's got an outer locking nut and it's got an inner locking nut. Now I've sprayed WD-40 inside here and I have not been able to budge this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a 13-pound post maul. And if any of y'all ever drove fence post as a kid, you know what a post maul is. Now it ain't a sledgehammer, it's a big wide-faced sledgehammer specifically for driving posts. Typically it's big and large like that, so you got a much larger area to come in contact, have a less of a tendency to split your posts and stuff with. I'm going to smack this thing a good bit with this and just see if I can pop it loose. The inner race is just kind of froze in there, but I think it's going to come loose. But what I'm going to do, to make sure I don't lose it, I'm going to put this outer nut back on. Just get a few threads on there, that outer nut. Kind of like at the circus when you try to ring the bell with the big sledge. By golly, I believe one hit did it. Without putting that inner nut back on there, you stand a chance of throwing the whole thing off and out here laying down, maybe getting grit and everything into it. Now I got to get a way to coerce that the rest of the way out. Use 2 screwdrivers, because if you can walk it from the top to the bottom, might be able to pull her out of there, because I have moved it just a little bit. If you take a look right there, once I got it free of all the rust. Race is a little worse for the wear, but the bearings themselves look pretty good. So we're going to clean these all up and we're going to repack those. What I'm going to have to do, this will never run more than a couple of miles an hour out here in the woods. So I don't have to worry a whole lot about these wheel bearings, especially if I get a little bit of lubrication in there. So what I'm going to do is let that 90 weight in the sump that's underneath this housing go ahead and lubricate that inner race. I'm going to look inside here and maybe clean that race up a little bit with the little crocus cloth. Clean this up and get the old wheel bearing grease. Okay, now everybody's got their own way of packing bearing grease. We got everything all nice and cleaned up. I used crocus cloth inside there, cleaned that all up, blew it all out with air and WD-40, so as much of the debris out that I can get out is gone. But I'll just take this old container, reach down inside there and get me a big old wad of it and just get it in my hand right here. And then just work and work and work. Eventually you'll see it coming out the inner part right there. I don't know if you can see that, but just work your way around the grease, work your way around the bearing. That's the way I learned whenever I was a kid out on the farm packing the different implement wheel bearings and tractor bearings and all that kind of stuff. It's just kind of one of those things that sticks with you. Now you can see it coming all the way through there, so we know we're packing all the way around those roller bearings. Oh, it's nasty. You get this all over your hands. And just think all those contaminants that I'm putting in my skin. Probably all kinds of good chemicals and everything. It's going to make me die young. It better hurry up because, man, I ain't young no more. Here it is, the 23rd of December. I don't know when this video gets put up, but 23rd of December. And I'm working in a t-shirt and a long sleeve shirt and actually sweating. As you can see, these are undisturbed right here, but all the way around, that grease has forced its way in, outside, and all the way around the inside of this bearing. This bearing is adequately packed at this point. Now I got to turn the camera off, but I don't know how. I've got that inner one tightened before I cleaned up my hands. Now we're ready to find the keyway here and then slide this washer in. And made it up. It's got that alignment pin right there. So we'll put our outer locking nut on. Now my dilemma is I'm going to have to come up with a way to keep the water out of here because I don't want the dirt, grit, and water to get inside that bearing anymore. So we got her filled, we got her looking good, it's packed in there, and just quiet as a church mouse. No squeaking, that's what I like. Took a piece of scrap metal and cut me a circle, blew 4 holes in it here, and I'm going to use 4 bolts to go ahead and hold me this little hubcap back on. But before I do that, I've got to clean out these threads, so I'll pick 4 opposing threads. There we go. Nice hubcap. Bearing's nice and packed. I'll pull this apart, seal that after a little bit of run time, make sure everything's nice. This side here still has the original hubcap, but we're experiencing a little bit of difficulty here because those bolts that are holding it on, there's 2 of them there, are both rounded off, and I can't get it to come loose no matter what. So we're going to solve that problem right now. But these 2, I think they're probably 7/16 bolts, and they've got a 5/8 square nut on them. Those guys are rusted in there, and all I'm doing is rounding them off, spreading my cheap Craftsman wrench and just kind of rounding them off. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these larger, they take 1 1/16 wrench, but it's a 5/8 bolt, and I'm going to set this on top here, and I'm going to weld those full, and what hopefully I'm going to do is give me much better perch by being able to use a hex socket, but I'm hopefully that heat that's going to be generated will transfer down through this bolt and start burning its way through that rust and stuff that's on those threads. Problem is there's just not very much room in here, so we got to use the larger MIG welder on a high setting to generate enough heat, attach the nut to the bolt without letting it just plink right off. Because a lot of times you won't get penetration when you're doing this, and you put a little bit of pressure on it and plink, it'll just fall right off. Don't ask me how I know that. Doesn't have to be pretty, but as you can see, she got pretty warm. So hopefully it's doing its thing. So I'm going to spray that down and go back to business of backing those nuts off. Boy, if I ain't the luck of the Irish, I don't know what is. That's pretty good. I ain't even Irish. You can tell by looking at this, that old nut has had some abuse over the years. Now what happened here, this was essentially just same song, second verse. Went through exactly the same steps on this side that I went to the other side. Got everything cleaned up, repacked, stuffed the inner bearing full of grease, and filled the sump full of 90, I can't remember if it was 90 or 140 weight gear oil. And so I went ahead and put it all back together, and it's ready to go. Okay, we got the hubcaps back on. I went ahead and cleaned up the threads in here, put in 4 new 7/16 threaded bolts. Bearings are packed. Everything is nice and clean and good to go. Use anti-seize on all these bolts, so hopefully 35, 40 years from now when my son takes these apart or my son-in-law takes them apart, they'll come out pretty easily. So this job's just about done. And here's the completed original axle cap that I got cleaned up and reinstalled. So everything is looking really well. Everything's looking really good. Bearing might have a little bit of a rumble, but you know what? I'm not going to replace them. They've lasted this long. They're going to last another 30 years, I would think. So there you have it. Quick servicing of the wheel bearings and stuff in this old 36 Chevrolet. Turned out really, really good. The bearings are still good. This has got a little bit of a grumble in them, but I mean, you know, my Lord, they've been running dry for a good Lord knows how long. So you kind of expect that. But there was no grindings. That's real good. As I flushed and cleaned everything out, there was no grindings. So they're going to last for a pretty good while. Like I said, no high-speed use back here in the woods. It's only going to run, 2 or 3 mile an hour, 4 mile an hour on a fast day, Hope you all enjoyed this. This is just a little maintenance on something that's 80 some odd years old, So, you know what? This Trackman 44, and I am out of here, guys.